Please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, good morning. Good morning and welcome to the EDA Annual Conference, New Horizons in EU Defense. My name is Lionel Sola. I am the Head of Communication and Media at the European Defense Agency, and today I will be your Masters of Ceremony. Before we start the conference, I would like to pass on a few important logistical details or practical information. First of all, I would like to tell you that we have 4 emergency exits in the room. They are in the 4 corners. Hopefully we will not need them, but it's important for you to know it. The second thing I would like to tell you is that as you will see, the room is very packed. We are pleased to have today about 400 persons on site and 800 participants online. So a warm welcome to you all. You will see on the badge that you have received that you have your name on one side, and on the other side you have the code to access the Wi-Fi, and you have a QR code that you can scan where you can access the full agenda and the biographies and photos of all speakers. Please kindly put your mobile phones and digital device on silent mode. And also I would like to tell you that this event is broadcasted online, followed by over 800 people that we will engage on social media using the hashtag EDAConf and EU Defense. So please share the good energy on social media. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to welcome on stage the Chief Executive of the European Defense Agency, Mr. Jerzy Szeliwi.
Dear Head of the Agency, High Representative Madam Kallas, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good morning. And it's a real pleasure to welcome you here to this year's EDA Annual Conference. And it is wonderful to see so many of you here today. This year, our conference takes place exceptionally in January, to welcome our new head of the EDA. We are honored to have you here with us, and you will be officially opening the conference just in a moment. We have received so much interest for on-site participation today that we've been slightly overbooked. There is about more than 400 people actually here in the room and more than 800 joining us online. Seeing such a high level of interest for the EDA Annual Conference, this is clearly a sign that our work and the future of EU defense is more relevant today than ever. Incidentally, this event falls just 2 days after what's often called Blue Monday, a day said to be the most dispiriting of the year. But I hope that our annual conference will bring energy and purpose, setting the tone for a more determined year in European defense. After all, we are celebrating 20 years of the European Defense Agency. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin today's conference with a simple truth. Our security, both home and abroad, is the foundation for the European Union itself, for the preservation of our values, our prosperity, our well-being, and perhaps even our survival. I believe that now more than ever, the EU needs a robust security and defense policy. European Defense Agency is at the heart of this European project. We bring together member states' ministries of defense, EU institutions, the defense industry, companies from large to small, innovators, academics, etc. We must be adaptive and agile enough to keep our armed forces ahead of existing and emerging threats. In some ways, EU defense efforts are as old as the EU itself. Today's conference is entitled New Horizons in EU Defense. Unlike in the past, there is now unprecedented political momentum, but also unprecedented security situation in terms of the spectrum and intensity of risks and threats coming upon us from all sides. The EU and its member states need to respond urgently, given above all Russia's unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine, but also a plethora of other crises and conflicts in other theaters close to European borders. The return of a full-scale war to Europe has reminded us that peace dividend of the post-Cold War era is unquestionably over. Meanwhile, the evolving global order or disorder, with China moving from trading partner to systemic rival, underscores the urgency of a united European response. With defense spending rising, the European Union must seize this moment. As the United States pivots towards addressing challenges beyond Europe, the EU must take on a greater share of responsibility. This is not just a necessity. It's a defining test of our ambition for greater autonomy, also in defense, in full complementarity with NATO indeed. We often speak of strategic autonomy. While this remains a noble goal, I believe we must firstly achieve operational autonomy. This means being able to act decisively when required, where required, without distancing ourselves from our transatlantic allies. The agency has worked tirelessly to turn words into action. Over the past decade, the number of projects we manage has grown from around 200 million euros in terms of the volume of the money behind the projects to 1 billion euros per year. This is this year. These are tackling Europe's most pressing defense needs, including, and I give you several examples of successful projects, supporting the multinational, multi-role transport tanker aircraft, which is now, the fleet is now fully operational. Developing our multinational helicopter program, now fully operational in terms of the multinational helicopter training center in Sintra, Portugal. Establishing the hub for EU defense innovation within EDA. Procuring 155mm ammunition for member state stockpiles, but above all for Ukraine. And to give you some more examples, working on critical maritime infrastructure, very low Earth orbit satellites, loitering munitions. And we have also worked on smaller yet important projects from new camouflage technologies to mine sweeping. So to put it simply, EDA is the nexus for EU defense cooperation, and we deliver. Still, even after 20 years, much remains to be done. The challenges ahead demand greater resources, deeper cooperation, and the trust and support of European citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my final EDA conference in the position of the Chief Executive of the agency, as my mandate ends in April. I'm sure my successor will continue this mission with vigilance and dedication, building on the foundation we have laid with the support of the excellent EDA team. Thank you very much. And now I'm very pleased and honored indeed to offer the floor to invite the head of the agency, High Representative, Mrs. Kallas. Please, Madam, the floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, dear guests, the European Defence Agency was established in an area of optimism. In 2003, my professor Javier Solana, my predecessor, wrote that Europe had never been so safe and prosperous. Just over a decade later, Russia invaded a part of Ukraine and took it for its own. 20 years later, and Russia's economy is in a war mode. Putin is spending well over a third of its budget, of his country's budget on the military. This is triple that it is before the war. He shows no sign of stopping or slowing down. People say I'm a Russia hawk. Well, I like to say that I'm a realist. For too long, we have offered Russia alternatives, hoping that it would choose cooperation and economic prosperity for its people over fraudulent imperialistic ambitions. But instead, Russia's defense industry is churning out tanks, glide bombs, artillery shells in vast quantities. In 3 months, they can produce more weapons and more ammunition than we can in 12. This is a heavily militarized country that presents an existential threat to us all. We are running out of time. The Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and ours. They are all buying us time. And from day one, the European Union and the member states have stood by their side. We have provided well over 134 billion euros in total, close to 50 billion euro in military support. This makes us the biggest international donor of Ukraine. We will have trained 75,000 Ukrainian soldiers by the end of this month. We have adopted the most wide-sweeping sanctions we have ever imposed. You cannot fuel an illegal war, deny a country its sovereignty, or kill innocent civilians and get away with it. Russia must take responsibility for its actions, and it has to pay. This is also why the windfall profits from the frozen assets of Russia, they accrued more than 3 billion euro last year, are being spent on Ukraine. This is more ammunition, more air defense, and cash injection in the European defense industry. I also want to look into doing even more, including on immobilized assets to fight for Ukraine. Every day Russia continues its war, the price must go up. Now we are working on a 16th package of sanctions. We have started to see Russia's economy taking a serious hit. They could not afford to continue their efforts in Syria while fighting in Ukraine. Russia's national funds are quickly depleting. The national interest rate is well over 20%. And they are getting far fewer resources from gas and oil. Gazprom and Sberbank are looking at mass layoffs. There is absolutely no doubt that we can do more to help Ukraine. With our help, they can also win the war. The only language that Putin speaks is the language of strength. The EU has strength. Together, EU member states' economies are 17 times bigger than that of Russia's economy. We must force his hand to show him that he will lose and stop him before he attacks one of our own. At the root of Europe's strength is our political and economic union. This is why as soon as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania left the Soviet prison, we all joined the European Union and NATO and swore that we will never be alone again. Together, we are just so much stronger. From bitter competition to peaceful and constructive competition. This is how Robert Schuman described the Union of Europe's coal and steel sectors in 1950. Of course, he was talking about removing the possibility for Europeans to wage war on each other. And it led to enduring peace between us. Today, we face war from outside. It's time to come together again. As we integrated our economies before, today we need integration in defense and interoperability on the ground. We do not need a European army. We need 27 European armies that are capable and can effectively work together to deter our rivals and defend Europe, preferably with our allies and partners, but alone if needed. An incrementalist approach to defense cannot work. We must stop tiptoeing around. This agency lives and breathes European defense, but the rest of us need to do it as well. In practice, this means, first, the EU population that understands what is at stake. Second, more spending on defense. Third, a society that is prepared for this. Fourth, EU member states with strong military capabilities and strong defense industries. And fifth, more cooperation with our partners. This is what we are now looking for in our white paper and the preparedness strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, many of our national intelligence agencies are giving us the information that Russia could test EU's readiness to defend itself in 3 to 5 years. Who else are we listening to if not them? We need to have public understanding of the threats we face. Close to 80% of Europeans are in favor of common defense and security policy among the European countries. Over 70% agree that the European Union needs to reinforce its capacity to produce military equipment. So I think our citizens know what is at stake, but politicians need to catch up too. Russia is not the problem for some, but for all of us. Europeans need to wake up. Last year, member states collectively spent an average 1.9% of GDP on defense. Russia is spending 9%. We spent billions on our schools, welfare, healthcare, but if we do not invest more in defense, all of this is at risk. Europe's failure to invest in military capabilities also sends a dangerous signal to the aggressor. Weakness invites them in. President Trump is right to say that we don't spend enough. It's time to invest. We need investment from member states and the private sector, but also from the common European budget. We must spend more than 1%. We need to relay a message that we are serious about our commitment to European defense. Even when we allocate enough money, we also cannot just go to the shop and buy a couple of tanks, air defense system, and a couple of helmets. The decisions we make today will only materialize in years from now, 2 at best, but a decade in some cases. I know I'm talking to a room full of experts, and those at the European Defence Agency know very well. Defence is highly skilled, highly intense industry, which requires money, people, and time. We have money and people, but we don't have time. Ukraine is buying us time. No, we are not yet at war, not yet. But as my friend Mark Rutte said when he stood on this stage a few weeks ago, we are not at peace either. We need to prepare. There's nothing that cannot be weaponized against us today. Putin's regime is already undertaking increasingly brazen acts of sabotage, cyber attacks in Spain and Czechia, election interference in Romania and Moldova, parcel bombs in Germany, disinformation campaigns, jamming of GPS systems that stop aircraft from landing, damage to underwater cables. We are already the targets of a hybrid war. In December, for the first time ever, we imposed sanctions on such attacks. 16 people and 3 companies were sanctioned. Last week, we adopted a plan for the cybersecurity of hospitals and healthcare providers. The security risk that the hospitals need to worry about a decade ago was some drug addicts coming and stealing the morphine. Today, cyber attack could turn off life-supporting machines, shut down operating theaters, and prevent patients from getting life-saving treatment. Today, this sector is the most attacked sector in the EU. We must include it in the discussions for defense. Hybrid attacks are often used to prelude to conventional attack, and they are conducted in parallel with the conventional attacks. As Solly Niinistö underlined in his report on preparedness, we must prepare for the worst. Ladies and gentlemen, the military needs capabilities and industrial strength from one member state to the next are hugely diverse. From ammunition to air defense, from long-range missiles to cyber defense, from military mobility to the need for protection of borders and underwater cables. This is also what explains the differences in approaches to defense as well as geography. Last week, I met the member states to discuss what we should prioritize on the EU level, because it is important that the member states agree where the EU can best support everyone to develop their capabilities. Beyond this, it is important to link the capability planning and EU defense industrial policy. This is why Commissioner Kubilius and I want to put forward an industrial output plan. Here, we must also learn from our past experiences. The Million Rounds Initiative for Ukraine was an Estonian idea. And although we have now delivered well over 1 million rounds, in the end, it was too little, too late. We need to make sure that we can ramp up our defense industry and get the products we need on time. We need to join up what we know about our capability gaps and how much we are missing with our own industries can produce. Then we can see how best to help the industry produce this and work with our allies in the cases where we can't do it in-house. I see the EDA with an instrumental role here. For decades, Europe has produced strategic documents, roadmaps, and declarations. It's time we move beyond to more missiles, tanks, and ships. Russia might have few friends, but Europe has much more. The US, the UK, NATO. First, the United States. They are our strongest ally and must remain so. A strategically competitive and increasingly confrontational world needs us both, and our transatlantic bond at its strongest. As two of the most powerful economic blocs on the planet, we are a vital artery to the global economy, and our prosperity is intertwined. The EU is one of the biggest export markets for the US after Canada and Mexico. 65% of direct foreign investments to the US come from Europe. The transatlantic economy employs more than 16 million workers in onshore jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. And in Europe, US companies are earning more than 2.5 times more than they are from Asia. We also share a common vision for the safe world. Our adversaries are cooperating and coordinating their actions against us. We must work together against the axis of upheaval. The biggest concern for the United States is China. But the fact is that if we do not get Russia right, we will not get China right either. China is closely watching how the transatlantic community responds to Russia's invasion to Ukraine. We need to make sure that the lesson is learned. Aggression as a foreign policy tool can never pay off. Ukraine's security against Russia is security for us all. Weakness here would only feed the confidence of our strategic rivals. But the EU's message to the US is clear. We must do more for our own defense and shoulder a fair share of responsibility for Europe's security. And we can be a closer partner for the US in the Indo-Pacific. On UK, they have left the Union, but they have not left Europe. They're still part of Europe. And they are one of our strongest military powers in Europe. The UK is a key partner for the European Union. We need a mutually beneficial relationship on security and defense. A new agreement on this would be a logical next step. This brings me to the NATO cooperation. NATO remains the foundation of collective defense and is crucial for the Euro-Atlantic security. The EU and NATO have 23 members in common. We are the most natural partners. And at the time when we worry about attacks against us, we need to concentrate our EU defense capability priorities where they are most needed. Less crisis management, more collective defense. This is what the European Defence Agency should help with too. Because every EU member state has a single set of defense planners and one defense budget. With this approach, the EU will support NATO, we will support each other's work, not duplicate each other's efforts. 20 years after the European Defence Agency was born, I don't think we are seeing the full potential of this agency yet. I wanted to do more, and this will also complement NATO's work on fragmentation across 11 main categories of major weapon systems, aircraft, ground vehicles, and combat vessels. The US has 32, and we in Europe, we have 172. In practice, this fragmentation pushes the costs up, limits interoperability, and creates logistical issues. Ukraine receives several different types of artillery systems and shells from us. They have had to adjust their guns when they are firing. We need to consolidate our defense industry and develop common weapon systems. Our European defense industry could then use the same military systems and help member states' militaries become more interoperable. The EDA already helps to create these synergies through cooperation projects with several member states. And in a single market with huge untapped industrial potential, the EU should also work for a single market on defense. On research and innovation, I also see the European Defence Agency as a real European incubator for defence. It can bring our brightest minds together for research and innovation on future defence projects. We should also think about defence in terms of jobs and innovation that is extremely positive for the rest of us and for the rest of society too. Without innovation in defense, we would not have the internet, the GPS, nuclear energy, or drones. Likewise, defense should reap the benefits of civilian-driven innovation in AI, robotics, and space. The EDA is currently working on satellite technology that could have huge benefits for our militaries. They are looking at how to easily maneuver satellites from low orbits where observation is better, but the risks of satellite damage is higher, back to the higher orbits where they are safer. And when together we invest, it costs much less. Ladies and gentlemen, although I see around the room mostly gentlemen, as we celebrate 20 years of the European Defence Agency, we are no longer in an area of optimism, but of opposition. We all need to be realistic about Russia. Russia poses existential threat to our security today, tomorrow, and for as long as we underinvest in our defense. 3 priorities. First, Ukraine is Europe's front line for defense. We need more, faster, and stronger support for Ukraine. Because the only language that Kremlin understands is the language of strength. Russia is not invincible. Russia's limited territorial gains in Ukraine come with unsustainably high losses and a crumbling economy. Time is not on Russia's side, but it's not necessarily on our side either, because we are not yet doing enough. Second, there should be no doubt in any of our minds that we need to spend more to prevent war. But we also need to prepare for war. We need to improve our capabilities. We need our defense industry to produce what we need. We must prepare for the worst. But we also should see this as a positive opportunity to develop stronger technological base in Europe. And third, we must work together with our allies too, with the United States, the UK and NATO and our partners across the globe. In such turbulent times, we need to stick together. There are countries that are fighting against us all, that are directly opposed to who we are, what we stand for, and the way we live our lives. Together, we have more than enough strength to defeat them. We must make use of this strength. Thank you.